Welcome back. I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest. First of all, she's written a book, and as you know, I love books and I love titles that just send you thinking. So, Love, Politics, and Other Scary Things. If that's not relevant to our time, I'm not sure what is. But Susan Platt has always been restless and she's always been searching for her next. So it kind of made sense that she would end up in Washington, D.C. doing something. And that something turned into an amazing whirlwind of a story of a life. And she's here to share it with us today. Susan, thank you so much for being here.
Lauren, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And as you know, as I've said, and as my viewers know, we're always really looking for people who are into their next. It's that restlessness that makes you search for what else can and should you do. So I do want to talk about the book because that's the latest next.
Right.
But let's do a little bit of the backstory. So tell us a little bit of your background and we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, steel town back then. My dad was one of 12 children who lived in a 2-bedroom apartment down with the steel mills. My mom was valedictorian of her class and there brought up close by and became the first woman auditor in the Navy in Pittsburgh. My dad was the only one to go to college because of the GI Bill. Met my mother. He was a dance instructor, so they danced and she encouraged him as he did her because she was the first woman auditor. So they had me and life was great. They were moving on up until my mother got breast cancer. And there's very few moments in my life that I remember her, but I remember her trying always to be put together and a classy woman, which I can't say I always am, but I aspire to that. But when I lost her, when she passed away when I was 8, life dramatically changed. That was a time when really parents didn't talk to children about these things, and cancer was a whole different deal. So my dad was very stoic, and so of course that's kind of what I became. But something inside me just was revving up, ready to go. I graduated from high school early. Again, on my path to running wherever I was going. My dad remarried, and I had a half brother and half sister, and a wonderful stepmother who recently passed away. But when I got out of high school early, I worked 2 jobs, got an apartment, and my dad tried to get me to go to college, and I said, no, I'm too busy. I got to live. I guess I never really thought about it until I really started writing this book, how you can look back on your life. When you're talking about it, you have a different perspective on why and how things happened, occurred, and how they're all interconnected. And I said no to college. I had to get out there and start working, and I got deathly sick. Working 2 jobs, one in the day, one at night. And my dad looked at me and said, okay, are you ready to go to college now? And I said, you bet. And so
college sounded like a vacation at that point.
Absolutely. And again, running, met my boyfriend there. I met the first day was a cowboy from Pennsylvania. He wore the cowboy boots and the cowboy hat, but he was from Pennsylvania. And he had a certain swagger. This will continue through my life. We just fell in love, and we were together nonstop for a couple of years until we had a falling out. We were getting too serious. I ended up marrying my first husband there, who lived in Maryland, brought me to Washington, D.C. And I found politics, and he didn't really, so the marriage didn't last. And I felt bad because it really wasn't anything we did or didn't do. We were just growing up. And I met my husband, soon to be husband, at a law firm, which at the time was one of the first legislative law firms that existed. And my husband was a client, and that's how I met him. And he wore cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, and he was a real cowboy from Ada, Oklahoma. So my second cowboy, I guess I was destined. There's something about the way they walk and their swagger that appealed to
There's
me.
that
And
swagger.
that was kind of how everything started.
And it sounds like that was really the beginning of a whole new direction for you. So how So Ron was your husband,
Right.
and together you guys really found more direction. I mean, you were seeking, and as a seeker, I can certainly relate. And sometimes you just don't want to slow down, but when you do, and you find that right place to land, then you get to create something even bigger. So tell us a little bit about the time you spent together and what
Yeah.
your world looked like.
Because he was an executive with a corporation based out of Miami, I ended up moving to Miami. I was already divorced. He was divorced. We'd both been divorced, and it was not particularly a happy time. But we discovered each other, and as it turns out, my boss at the time was from Oklahoma, and of course knew my husband, and he played matchmaking. And we did get together, and when we married, we did for life. It was one of those things where we said, look, we've both been married before. He had a couple children. I had none. And it was like, this is it. This is too hard on all of us. We made a commitment and we stuck by that. Unfortunately, our marriage was like a calamity of errors, given that we had to postpone it for political reasons, and we had to get married if we wanted to stay in the room at the hotel with the corporation and all kinds. And he showed up at the wedding with one patch over his eye. I mean, it was just a calamity of errors. But we made that commitment, and sometimes you make the commitment and you hope it works out. This time it was like, we're not changing this. So for 43 years, we did that. We pushed each other. When the Democrats lost the Congress and lost the White House, we moved back up to Washington, and we both recaptured our careers and reinvigorated our careers and worked hard. I can say we never had a vacation more than 2 or 3 days until we've been married probably 20 years, because we just worked so hard. And politics is that kind of business. That it was 24/7 back then. Now you can't even keep up with anything in an hour's time. Um, but we pushed each other. I pushed him. He ended up doing work for Donald Trump, actually, and getting paid. And he he was named one of the top 20 lobbyists in his field in Washington. And I ended up going to become a campaign manager for the biggest race in the country in 1994, which was Chuck Robb, who was married to Lyndon Johnson's daughter, Linda Robb, against Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North of Iran-Contra fame. So it was a huge race. And I don't know what the heck I thought I was doing, but I said to my husband, I'm going to manage that race. And we had moved to Virginia. We were in D.C. for a while on Capitol Hill. And he said, well, go for it. And sure enough, I did. And this is about those scary things that I talk about. Love's scary. Politics is scarier sometimes. And I just thought, I want to do this. And wasn't qualified, never run a statewide race before. And sure enough, got the job. And against all odds, we won. And beyond that, because I had my husband who pushed me to do whatever I could do. He always said, you can do whatever you want to do. And I think a lot of us grow up with our fathers saying that to the young daughters and the mothers too, but we don't always believe it. But I had him there with me, and I did for him as he did for me. And then from that, I went and became Joe Biden's chief of staff in the Senate, then ran for office myself for lieutenant governor. And did quite a number of things that I think were first in my state, as did my husband politically, nationally. Um, he lost his daughter to alcoholism. And then eventually, as a result, I lost him. But I had to keep doing those scary things that don't kill you, because he was now gone and I had to do it without him. So I think this is, it's a story for women, but it's a story for men on how men can help their partners and women can help their partners together. We live in a world that's so conflicted, and so everybody's angry. Everybody wants something for nothing, and commitment is important, and loving each other is important, and we did that. And so my questions came out that how was I going to do that on my own, and the story details that. It's not a sad story. It's funny in parts. It's sad in parts, but I think it's inspiring in parts. And it's amazing when you look back on your life. I'm not a famous author, musician, politician, didn't discover anything great about science or anything else or medicine. But I think we all can learn about our lives and the people that surround us and how we can do better and be examples for our children. I wrote this book to honor my husband, but I wrote this book as a guide from my granddaughter and her children and her two girls. And it's a very it's very fulfilling, but you know, everybody has a story.
Everybody does have a story. And so Ron passed away 2 years ago, you said?
I passed away in 2022 in June.
Mhm.
And so, excuse me, do you see that? And I had to decide what to do next. So, for 3 months, I kind of just sat there and didn't move, kind of like what he did. And then I decided I got to pick myself up. This is not me. You know, I really thought because of my mother, I'd be dead at 40, and here I am, almost 70, thinking, what am I still doing here? But you know, with Ron, we had great purpose together with our love and great purpose in our career, helping others. You know, one thing that we always wanted to do was help in our communities and make lives better. So now I had to think, how was I going to accomplish that when I couldn't even get myself off the couch? So my four dogs and I set out to find a place. We moved to a couple acres in the country where I'm surrounded by deer and geese in my pond and birds and eagles and the whole things to try to gather myself up to find my next purpose. And so there's some funny stories along the way of what happens and about my animals and our animals and my four dogs. Um, but I think, you know, I've just finished reading a book called Wintering. I think we don't take the time sometimes to sit back and take and realize we need time to rest to recover. Someone, you know, you think when you lose a spouse, people tell you 1 year of mourning. Well, the woman down the street, and there's some quirky characters out here in the country, said, Susan, no, it takes 3 years. And I'm close to 3 years. And it does take a while. It does take a while to pick yourself up, but you just have to keep looking forward and find that purpose again. And that's what I'm trying to do with this book and help to engage others to find their purpose. And like I said, there are some funny moments in this book too. So it's not all sad.
Well, and that's the thing, even through the period of grief, it doesn't mean you don't have joy.
No.
Joy does still come and it peeks its head in, and then slowly the balance resets, but there is no one size fits all. It happens when it happens. And in telling the story, I'm understanding that for like for a lot of people, and certainly a lot of our authors who have written memoirs of a similar situation, everybody comes at it from a different place.
Exactly.
Everybody heals differently, but in the end, it's a very healing process. And I really encourage people, whether it's you're grieving a death, you're grieving, the loss of anything, whether it's your ability to do something or someone's illness, or like you said, Ron kind of faded out after his daughter's passing, and you had to still figure out your next too. I don't think that ends. And as long as we're alive and wanting to live,
Yes.
something like writing a book, journaling in a big way, sharing it with others, not only allows you to express yourself, as you said so well, it lets you look back and tell the stories and remind yourself, but it also can help others along the way, which I think is amazing. So where can viewers find the book and purchase if they want to?
Right, they can find it on Amazon, they can find it on Goodreads, Barnes and Noble. I think they can have it and go online. You know, but I do encourage them if I encourage them to read my book if they're interested. I think it's a good read. I think it's good for people of all ages, and I think it's good for other people to consider doing the same. I never journaled. And it's something that I know a lot of my friends do. This was just a sit down and slug it out. But when I sit back and think now, when I started this book a little over 2 years ago, I didn't think about how the correlation with my mother's death. I couldn't say my mother without tearing up until I wrote this book. Not only did it help me deal with my husband's passing, but it helped me deal with the passing of my mother at a young age, which I never dealt with really, and my father and others, and then deal with what we've done in our lives and be able to look back and say, I'm proud of this. And if maybe someone writes this book now and says, I'm proud of my life, but I think there's more I can be more proud of if I continue to find another purpose. And I think that's what we all want to do. When my husband was dying, um, I was asleep. I'll tell you a quick story. And the book starts with this, so I hope people won't realize it's just all sad. But I was laying in the hospital bed with him, and they put a cot next to him that I was equal with, and I had one arm around his shoulder and one hand holding his. Well, his head was in my shoulder, and I was sleeping, and in my dream, he woke up and looked at me and said, "Susan, I'm gonna be okay." And I was just I woke up and I looked at the clock. It was 1:30 in the morning. I thought, that's not possible. He's not going to be okay. We've done all the tests. He's not going to be okay. We've taken away all the machines and nothing's beeping. And the next thing you know, I'm looking around. There's no light in the room because the shower curtains are I call them shower curtains. The curtains are around the beds and the lights are off. It's, really dark outside. And all of a sudden, I look down, and in his lap are just a bundle of, I call them Tinkerbell fairy lights, dancing. And I just was mesmerized. I'm not a particularly religious person. I don't know what happened. Someone told me that kind of thing happens when you're under great stress. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing, it was a great sense of peace for me. And I always, on my little board in my kitchen, I have this, remember the lights, that I write in chalk. The lights keep me going. And everyone needs to know what it is that keeps them going. And for me, it was my husband and those lights.
Well, I appreciate the story, and I know our viewers are going to want to know more. And as you and I discussed earlier, even just the title makes you want to read the book. So thank
Thank you.
you so much for sharing. Thank you for coming to share with us. And we will put up all the information so our viewers can find the book and hopefully reach out to you for more.
And remind them all to keep doing those scary things that don't kill them.
Absolutely. And I'll remind myself. Thank you. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back.